morning once again, and I welcome you back for the second session of the fourth day of the 98th Annual Conference of the Music Academy. Our topic this morning is Between Page and Stage, Raga and Raga Music in Classical Literary Sources. Our speaker, Naresh Keerthi, is Assistant Professor, Department of Sanskrit Studies at Ashoka University. His research is in the overlapping literary cultures of Sanskrit, Prakrit, Telugu, and classical Kannada. Naresh studies the Sanskrit poetry and plays, Kavya Nataka texts, their commentaries and the texts of literary and dramaturgical theory, Kavya Shastra and Natya Shastra, to historicize the distinct trajectories of theory and practice, Lakshya and Lakshana in these domains. As he writes himself, long ago he studied Carnatic vocal music from several teachers, and he is also interested deeply in musicology and the cultural history of the song in early modern South India. Today, Dr. Naresh, as I said, will be speaking to us about page and stage, raga and raga music in classical literary sources. Over to you, Naresh. We have 45 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Many thanks to the team of the Madras Music Academy and the Secretary V. Sriram, who invited me for this talk. I'd like already now to congratulate the Sangeeta Kalanidhi designate, T.M. Krishna. It's an honor to present a talk at this splendid venue where great musicians, musicologists, and scholars have entertained and educated audiences for close to 100 years now. In my talk today, I'll take you over passages from a range of literary texts, Kavya, Nataka texts in Sanskrit and Prakrit, but also literary texts in Kannada and Telugu from early modern South India. By early modern, I mean roughly the period between 1500 to 1800. The point of this exercise is to see what the accounts of the performing arts are in the literary arts. So what we'll do is essentially an exercise in time travel. We'll go back in space and time and visit poems produced in different parts of South India and the Deccan and try and put together a picture of the world of music, raga music in particular, because that's what Krishna wanted. As I gathered my notes for this talk, I realized what a daunting task it is to try and extract meaningful insights about the world of Sangeeta from the domain of Sahitya. And as I was doing that, I was reminded of two remarkable personalities. To meet them, let's go on a smaller time travel. Let's go back to this very place, the Madras Music Festival, from exactly 50 years ago. The secretary was Professor V. Raghavan, who was a scholarly Sarvajna. He read everything, he remembered everything, and never minced words if he thought something was wrong. The Kalanidhi designate, a surprise nomination for everyone, including himself, was Rallapalli Anantakrishna Sharma, another Sarvajna, perhaps a gentler one, and he was another true master of Sahitya and Sangeeta. Now, both of these scholars were much more qualified for giving a talk of this kind, and they would have done a splendid job. I dedicate this talk to the glorious memory of these Samans and begin. My first vignette is from a play. It's the genre called the Natika. This is a play written in 12th century Madhya Pradesh, the Vijayasri Natika of Mandana. Now, let me tell you a bit about the Natika as a genre. Features of the Natika are already seen in the Malavikagnimitra of Kalidasa, but this genre was truly inaugurated by the poet king Harshavardhana of Kanauj, with his two plays, the Priyadarshika and the Ratnavali. If one had to find an analog for the Natika as contrasted to the Nataka from contemporary genres, one could perhaps say that the thing that comes closest to it is the rom-com, the romantic comedy. Hero meets a beautiful woman, they both fall in love, there's some obstacles to their love, including comic episodes. Everything is resolved in the end. So another remarkable thing about the Vijayasri Natika is that it was not found in manuscript, but was found inscribed in two pieces of stone in the Kamal Maula Masjid in Dhar in Madhya Pradesh. So let's read a bit. This is going to be the exercise. We're going to read samples of Kavya and we're going to see what they have to say about music. So let's read this passage. Amshadnyasa graha krita padam taditam mandra bhumau Shadjam tanvan rishabharahitam daivate napi hinam hindolakhya sukhayati dadhan madhyamam taradeshe kampam bibhrat kimapi ruchiram shadjake panchamecha. So this play was written under the patronage of a king, Paramara king called Arjuna Deva Varman. He himself was very literary. He was a descendant of Bhoja. And not surprisingly, the hero of the play is Arjuna Deva Varman. So the scene being described is a scene from the Vasanta Ritu. During spring, Vasanta, they have this festival of ritual festival of playing upon the swings. Now the swing is also called a hindola or a hindola. And during the hindola ritual, there is song being sung, the king is listening, and very familiar scene, many of you might have done this yourself, seen others in the audience of a concert scratching their head, trying to figure out what is that strange raga being played by the violinist or being sung by the musician. And the king here, he's saying, so what is this? Priye kimuchyate, what is this going on? And he says, this thing or this person, because grammatical gender doesn't distinguish between living and non-living things, this thing or person called hindola is pleasing everyone, sukhayati. And what does this hindola do? Ansha Jnasa Graha Krita Padam. It makes its presence with the Ansha, Jnasa and Graha. It steps on the scene with Ansha, Jnasa and Graha. And then Taditam Mandra Bhumau. It persists or endures in the lower octave. Shadjam Tanvan. It leans on the Shadja. It is Rishabha Rahita. It is devoid of the Rishabha. And then Dhaivate na Pihinam. It's also deficient in the Dhaivata. What else? Dadhan Madhyamam Taradeshe, and this one touches the Madhyama in the upper octave. And then Kampam Bibhrat, Ruchiram Kampam Bibhrat, Shadjake Panchamecha. And this raga, it has beautiful kampas, Ruchira kampas, in the Shadja and the Panchama. And now, like we saw in Hana and Rajagopal's wonderful performance, it's the moment for a bit of comedy. And the Vidushaka, who's the king's sidekick, he says, oh, I know what you're talking about, the hindola. This is the hindola that the women swing upon during the hindola Chaturthi festival. And the Raja smiles, Smitam Abhiniya. He says, Nunam Abhigno Bhavan Gramarageshu. Oh, you are an expert on Gramaragas. You should include the Vidushaka in the experts committee. Now, there'll be several things that strike you as unusual here. So the first thing is, this is a description of Hindola. Now, whether you think of the Carnatic Hindola or the North Indian Hindol, this one, it says it lacks the ri and the dha, whereas what we are used to in both these places is ri and pa. The other thing which may give musicians a heart attack is that there are beautiful kampas on the Shadja and the Panchama, and you're mostly used to sa and pa not having kampas on them, though I don't think it's that surprising. Furthermore, the king characterizes it as a grama raga, so that's something to notice as well. Let's move on to another example, and again, in our time travel coming closer to where we are, my next samples are from a Jaina Kavya from Karnataka. There's a poet called Terakanambi Bommarasa. He has retold a Kavya story which is known in the Jaina traditions, the story of Shrenika and the story of Sanatkumara. This is called the Sanatkumara Charite. That's an image of a Jinnah outside the Hanuman temple in Terakanambi, which is, I think, in Mandya district. So this is the story of Prince Sanatkumara and his friend, the minister's son, Mahendra Simha. Mahendra Simha gets to see an entertainment performance, what they would call a variety performance. So there's music and dance being put up by Apsarases. So let's see what the Apsarases did. This is in the Shatpadi meter. ಸರಸ ಗೀತದ ಶ್ರುತಿಗೆ ನಟಿಪಳ ಚರಣ ಕಮಲ ನ್ಯಾಸದಂಗನೆ ಕರದೊಳ್ಳೊತ್ತುವ ತಾಳಲಯಕನುಸಾರಿಯಹುದೆನಿಸಿ ಜರಿವ ಮೇಲುದ ಜೋಲ್ವ ಮುಡಿಕುಚವೆರಲುಗಳೊಳ್ಳೋರ್ವಳು ಮೃದಂಗವ ಕರಕುಶಲದಿಂ ಧಿಮಿ ಧಿಮಿಕ್ಕೆನೆ ಬಾಜಿಸಿದಳೊಲಿದು. So as the dancer, we have to infer that, it's not mentioned in the verse, as the dancer marked the tempo with her feet, charana kamala nyasadi, and with her hands, karadol ottuva tala layake, another apsaras, she played upon the mridanga with karakushala, with great skill. But then, how did she play on the mridanga? There's a beautiful passage describing what she did to the mridanga. Tanage hitavanu nudiyada durjanage bailanchavanu koduvolu vanite murajananake pindavani kitantaledu tanulateyu ಒಲದಾಡೆ ಧಿಮಿ ಧಿಮಿಕೆ ನಲು ಧಂ ಧಂ ಧಳರು ಧಳರೆನೆ ಘನತರಾನಂದದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾಜಿಸಿದಳು ಸುಕೌಶಲದಿ. So if there's someone who's speaking harsh things against you, tanage hitavanu nudiyada durjana. So durjana, wicked people who go around saying nasty things about you, how do you silence them? You stuff their mouth with something sweet. So either give them a bribe or feed them some sweets. And that's exactly what this Mardangika woman did. So the mouth of the mridanga was sounding a bit harsh, so she stuffed it with some flour. Pindavan ikki, she smeared flour on the mouth, on the face, the murajanana of the mridanga, so that it sounded sweet. And then she picked up the drum, and what did she do? Tanulataya oledaadi, swaying her body beautiful as a vine. She played on the mridanga, so she's playing while standing or dancing. But then, what did she play on the mridanga? Sulabha suladdigala nelanu lalita chari chanchu putagala tilidu jaya mangala jaya Shri Simhanadagala. ಉಲುಹುಮಿಗೆ ನೂರೆಂಟು ತಾಳಂಗಳ ನೆಲೆಯನರಿದೊಲಿದು ಖೇಚರ ಲಲನೆಯೊರ್ವಳು ತಾಳಗಲನೋತುತಳ್ ಒತ್ತುತಲೊಪ್ಪಿದಳು. So she played the somewhat simple 7 suladi talas, suladigalanu, and then she played the elegant chachari and chanchuputa, and then knowledgeably, Tilidu, she played Jayamangala, Jayashri, Simhanada, and then she played the impressive Noorentu Talam, the 108 Talas. So we see that this was Mridanga Vidushi, who knew quite a lot. But then, was it only dance and Mridanga? No, also I think in Bommarasa's time, there wouldn't be an audience if it was just that. So there was also singing. ವರ ಮಧುರ ತರ ಮಂದ್ರ ತಾರಕ ಸರಸ ಸುಸ್ವರ ಹವಣು ಕಂಪಿತ ಗರುವಿಕೆಯು ಗಂಭೀರ ಸವಿಧಾನಗಳ ನೆಲೆಯರಿದು ಕರಮೆಸೆವಧನ್ಯಾಸಿ ಸಲೆಮಲಹರಿ ಲಲಿತೆ ಕಾಂಬೋಧಿ ಗಳಕೆ ಚರನಿತಂಬಿನಿಯೋರ್ವಳಾದರದಿಂದ ಪಾಡಿದಳು. So another apsaras, she sang in pure, sweet tones. She sang in the lower and upper octaves as well. Mandra taraka, she sang with suswara. She sang with havanu. Now this is a deshya technical term which perhaps is related to pramana. So she sang with the right measures. Kampita, you recognize. But what did she sing? She sang the delightful dhanyasi. She sang malahari, lalite, and kambodhi. So what can we gather? Let's gather our thoughts at the end of this selection from Bommarasa's Kavya. We've seen this description of dance, drumming on the mridanga, and a musical performance. The drumming involved both the Suladi talas, the Marga talas, the Desha talas, the scheme of 108, which, as you'll see from my examples, is frequently mentioned in literary sources of this time. And we also saw a beautiful description of the preparation of the mridanga, which resonates right down to what is being done on stage every day today. Okay, my next selection is from even closer home. Now, I've picked a kavya called the Chokkanathacaritramu, a Telugu kavya of Tiruvengala Raju. People in the world of music will not be surprised if you see funny family names for Telugu scholars. So Adyapaya, the composer of the Virubhoni Varna, his family name was Pachimiriam, which means green chili. Tyagaraja's teacher, Venkatasubaya, his family name was Sonti, which meant ginger. We've known musicians who had the family name Neti, which means ghee. And our poet, Tiruvengala Raju, his name is Pachakapurapu, which is Pachaikarpuram. So if you collect enough of these authors, perhaps you can make a nice recipe. He was writing in Madurai. He was in the court of a chieftain of the Vijayanagara king Achyutaraya called Golla Peddarama. The story he's retelling is the story of Chokkanatha, the deity of Madurai. So it's a retelling of the Halasya Mahatmya or the Tiruvilayadal Puranam. And what's the scene I've picked? This is the scene when the arrogant musician who comes from out of town, called Hemanatha, or in the movie Hemanatha Bhagavatar, comes to the court of the Madurai king and pronounces himself as being this best musician. He also gives a demonstration of it, and then he challenges the king of Madurai to bring forth musicians from his court who can defeat him. So let's see what Hemanatha did in the Chokkanathacaritramu. ఆపాట కుండునూన పుడా పాండ్య భూపాలకుని రాజ్యమునకును బోయి ఆ రాజు పొడకాంచి అధిక గంభీర శారీరయుక్తుడై సన్నిధి నిల్పి గాన విద్యకు నేనెగాక నాయీడు గాననెవ్వరినే యుగమున నదిప. So that singer Hemanatha went to the Pandya kingdom. He sought an audience with the king and said in an impressive voice, Adhika Gambhira Sharira Yuktudai, I am the champion of music, Gana Vidyaku Nene. Na Yidu Ganan. I don't see anybody who's a match for me, not just here, not just today, not just in Madurai. Yugammuna. In this whole yuga, there's nobody who matches me. What did he do then? He sang before the king. తానమానముల శాస్త్రక్రమంబు దానని పువ్వుల దండె చేయతి వేళలేరింగి ఆ స్వరములేర్పరచి లాలితంబైన ఆలాపమ్ము చేసి తన రుసూళాది గీత ప్రబంధములు నను ఒప్ప మంద్ర మధ్యమ తారకముల పాడినాతడు మహాప్రౌఢిమ మెరసి. So he took up a veena. I think the second line is not so clear. I think it's corrupt. It says, Puvula dande chayati, which means he took up a flower garland in his hand. I'm not sure if that's what is meant. I think a dande in the sense of a dandi, a veena is meant over here. So he took up a veena, I think, and played tanas. Tanamana or talamana is a term we find frequently in descriptions of music. And he sang according to the Shastra Krama with mastery of music theory. He sang all the notes in a timely way, which I think means he picked ragas that were suitable for the time of the day. Lalitambaina alapammu chesi. So he performed an alapana. And then he sang Suladi Gita Prabandhamulu. So he sang Suladi's Gitas and Prabandhas with great skill, Praudhima, Merasi. What happened next? వేడుకతో రాజు విని చాలా మేచి యుడుగుర లిప్పించి ఉలుపవట్టించి విడిదికి పంపి ఆ వేళనే విభుడు బాణుని పిలపించి బహుళ సంగీత జాణవు వీణా విచక్షణాఖ్యుడవు ప్రాగల్భ్య గతి మించి పాటించి నీవు బాగుగా వినితో పాడి గెల్చినను. So the king, he listened to this man's performance and he was very impressed. Chala mechi, udugural ippinchi, ulupa pattinchi. So he had many gifts given to him. Then he sent him back to his lodgings, Vididiki, Pampi. And then the king, he sent for Bana or Bana Bhadra, as he's known, that is musician in his court. And he said, you're the musical virtuoso, Sangeeta Janavu, Veena Vichakshanavu, you're the expert on the Veena. So somehow use your skills, use your wits, and defeat this man in a music contest. And we all know what happens after this. 5 Shivajis come on stage. Is it 6? So let's reflect a bit on the musical elements we've seen in this passage from the Chokkanathacaritramu. This Hemanatha Bhagavata, when he comes to court and his intention is to impress, and this is happening in the 16th century, by which time all over South India and the Deccan, you had the pada, you had the kirtana, you certainly had these forms. But what does Hemanatha Bhagavata sing to impress? He sings suladis, gitas, and prabandhas. So perhaps that tells us something about the meaning of these genres in a courtly setting. My next set of examples. Yeah.
Sorry, could that be more Chaturdandi?
Yeah, we're just missing one dandi here. Yes, yes, exactly right. My next set of selections are from a kavya of Kanakadasa. Now, most of you may know Kanakadasa as a composer of songs, and his songs were popularized by great musicians, M.L. Vasantakumari, R.K. Srikanthan, but rightfully, Kanakadasa should be known equally prominently as an author of kavyas. He has several kavyas, one on the story of Nala and Damayanti, this one, Mohanatarangini, which is on the story of Aniruddha and Usha, and he also has a very interesting kavya on a competition between rice and ragi. It's called the Ramadhanya Charite. He was a very scholarly poet. He was a very good poet. Now, this is a section which is describing Usha's father, the demon Banasura. And Banasura is a king. Though he's an asura, he's a king. So he has all of the regime that a king does, which means ritually, the Vaitalikas, somebody come in the morning to wake him up in a ritual fashion. And so you may have heard the Venkatesha Suprabhata. Now you'll hear the Banasura Suprabhata, which is being sung by the women musicians in his court. Dappaga nardhangi yaru, dappaga nardhangiya ರೂಪಿಗಿಮ್ಮಡಿ ಸುಪ್ರೌಢಾನ್ವಿತೆ ಕೇಳು ಪುಷ್ಪ ಸುಗಂಧಿಯರು ಬಂದರು ಬಾಣನುಪ್ಪಡವನು ಪಾಡುವೋಡೆ ಮೇಳವ ಮಾಡಿದಂಟಿಗೆ ವಿಡಿವರು ಶುದ್ಧ ಸಾಲಗ ಸಂಕೀರ್ಣ ವಿಧದಿ ಆಲಾಪಠಾಯನೆ ಮಗಳಿಂದೆ 108 ತಾಳಗೀತಗಳ ಪಾಡಿದರು. So what did they do? These Pushpa Sugandhiyaru, sweet-smelling women, came to wake up Bana, to sing the daybreak songs for Bana. Melava Madi Dandige, so they tune their tamburas or their vinas, hold them, and then sing in the Shuddha, Salaga, Sankirna modes. But what did they sing? Alapa Thaya Nemagalinde, 108 Tala, Geetakala Padidaru. So you have Alapa, Thaya, and Geetas. What kind of Geetas? Again, we see they sang Geetas in Talas from the scheme of 108 Talas. What did they sing? ನಾರಾಣಿ ದೇಶಾಕ್ಷಿ ಗುಜ್ಜರಿ ದೇವಗಾಂಧಾರಿಗುಂಡ ಕ್ರಿಯೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಆರಭಿ ಸಾಮಂತ ಮಲಹರಿ ಎಂದೆ ಕೈವಾರಿಸಿ ಖಲನ ಪಾಡಿದರು. What did they sing? So finally we get to listen to the Suprabhata song that they sing. Baligarbha sampurna chandra daityendra per bulisamma vasana tadvashana ಲಲಿತಾಂಗಿಯ ತೋಳ ತೆಕ್ಕೆ ಸದ್ಮಕ್ಕೆಂದು ಒಳಿದು ಏಳಪೇಳಿ ಪಾಡಿದರು. So they sang his praises in Narani, Deshakshi, Gurjari, Devagandhari, Gundakriya, Arabhi, Samanta, and Malahari. And they sang the praises of that villain, Khalana Padidaru. And what did they sing? Baligarbha Sampurna Chandra. So you are the moon that emerged in the lineage of Bali. He's the son of Mahabali. Daityendra, you're the monarch of demons. Perbuli Samma Vasana Tadvashana, you're a devotee of Shiva. ಲಲಿತಾಂಗಿಯ ತೋಳ ತೆಕ್ಕೆ ಸದ್ಮಕ್ಕೆಂದು ಒಲಿದು ಏಳಪೇಳಿ ಪಾಡಿದರು. They sang, saying, look, your wife is waiting for you, your beautiful woman is waiting for you, please come. Now's the time to wake up. So Kanakadasa too, we see in his kavya, he doesn't have these women while waking up Banasura sing a pada or a kirtana. They are waking him up with fairly heavy fare. They're singing alapas, thayas, and gitas in the Shuddha, Salaga, Sankirna modes and the 108 talas. Look at the list of ragas. I wonder if we'd ever hear a concert with this constellation of ragas. So these things were popular in Kanakadasa's time. I'm coming close to the end of my selections, and we're also coming closer in space and time to where we are. My next selection is from a kavya written by Raghunatha, the ruler of Tanjavur. It's a Telugu Dvipada kavyam called the Nalacaritamu, Tanjavur circa 1600. Now, he was a poet and an author deeply steeped in music. Now, if you were to so this is a Veena performance by Damayanti. Now, Damayanti is the princess of Vidarbha, which is somewhere in Maharashtra. So, what kind of music would a princess of Maharashtra play on the Veena? Well, because it's Raghunatha Nayaka writing it, she plays exactly what a princess in Tanjavur would play at this time. ముమ్మారు ఠీవి సొంపులగుల్కు మీటి ముమ్మూర్ఛనమ్ములు ముమ్మరింపుచును కృతుల ప్రమాణంబు కేవలంబుగను. I think the text is corrupt. I feel we should amend it to శృతుల ప్రమాణంబు కేవలంబుగను ప్రతిజూపి సరిగమ పదని త్రిస్థాన స్వరములన్ అన్నిటిని వరుసతోనంటి స్వరగుంభనంబు వలావలి మెరయంగా. So what did Damayanti do? She didn't just start playing on the veena. She first strummed the strings with flair, sumpulu gulka meeti, and then she practiced the murchanas over and over. Mummurchanammulu mummarimpuchunu. She repeated the murchanas, and then srutula pramanambu kevalambuganu pratijupi. And I think this means she tested the shrutis of the individual notes both absolutely kevalambuganu and pratijupi by checking the counterpoint against other notes. And then Sarigama Padani Tristhana Swaramula Annitini Varusaton Anti. I think she played the Varasas, she ran over the scales, and then Swaragumbhanambu Valavali Merayanga. And so she practiced phrases of music, and this is all just the warming up. She hasn't begun playing yet. Shankhambu Karani Shadjambu Numiti Punkinchi Ayitambu Ghatilla Jesi Nataragambu Chandambella Madini Patinchukoni Roshabambhanyamana. Again, I think the text is corrupt here. I think it should be something like Rishabhambhanyamana, Rishabha Lambyamana, or something like that. Dhurini Shadjambu Pondu Padanga Migula Sarigama Sarigama Padanisa Kramamu. So she struck the sa, and it sounded like a shankha was being blown. And then she unfurled the aitam of the raga. And then did she already start playing it? No. Nataragambu Chandambella Madini Patinchukoni. So she meditated on the beauties of the Nataraga before she started playing it. And then she played it. Rishabha, doubtful passage. I think Rishabha Alambyamana Dhuri Nishadjambu Pondu. So the Rishabha that glides into the Shadja, that's what I think it should be. And then she played the note sequences, Sarigama, Sarigama, Padanisa, Kramamu, in that sequence. There's a very long, very evocative passage in the Nalacaritamu of her performance. I'm skipping bits for want of time. I'm not going to read this passage, but here there's a description of how she played wave upon wave of Tana. Nonaredu, Tanambulan, Undonda Varusa, one after the other she played Tana. And then she created Rangu and Rakti, that is color and emotion for the raga. How did she do that? Jiva Kalaravambula Tantri Kampita Mimpu, by drawing upon the Jiva Kalarava, which I think means the Jiva Swaras, and playing them with Kampita. Havanimpa Shadja Madhyamamula Dhalu Navanava Gatulan Andamu Meera Meeti Nadambu Rishabha Gandhara Daivata Nishadambu Lottuchu Swaramulanniyu Navagati Mincha Gandhara Daivatamul Avarohanammula Vatsunapuda Varjinche. So she strummed at various speeds, Navanava Gatula, and then she glided from the Shadja to the Madhyama. She played all the notes, Rishabha Gandhara Daivata Nishada, but even at high speeds, Avarohamuna Gandhara Daivatamu Varjinche. So when she was going on downward movement, she avoided the Gandhara and the Daivata. And then తేనియల్ చిందు పొందికగల సంచారి తానముల్ చాల నందముగ వాయించి ఆ రాగమై సిరి అంతయు మెరయ తీరుమానము వింత తీరుగా మీటి అంతట గౌళకునాయిత్తంబలర వింతగా స్వరపుష్టి వెలయు పుంఖంబు. So she played Sanchari Tanas expertly in Nata. It was like honey to the ears. And when she had demonstrated or exhibited all the splendors of this raga, a ragamai siri antayu mereya tirumanamu vinta tiruga meeti. She performed a tirumanamu, and then antata gaulakun ayittam balara. And then she performed the ayittam for the raga gaula vintaga swarapushti velayu punkambu. The raga gaula unfolded. I've skipped a passage which describes how the gaula is, how the rishabha of the gaula hugs the shadja, how there is also a sadharana gandhara according to Raghunatha in gaula, and then how she took care not to encroach onto Malava while playing gaula, and she played sthayi tanas in gaula. So I've skipped those passages. But then there's a passage which I can't skip. పొందుగా జూపి అపూర్వ రాగమున నందంబు మీర జయంతి సేనికిని జీవస్వర స్ఫూర్తి చలగనాయితము గావించి రాగ సంగతి స్వర క్రమము మైవడి దగ పంచమం బొత్తి గౌళ దైవత మంటి గాంధారంబు గూర్చి కొనిషడ్జమున కుడిగ్గుచునవరోహమున మధ్యమం బొత్తి మోహన లీల. So there's a description further of how she played songs in Bhairavi, Shri and Shankarabharana after that, and then she decided to play an Apurva raga. So she picked up Jayanti Seni, which is perhaps Jayanta Sena, and then she unfurled the Ayittam of the raga with the Jivaswaras. She played all the note sequences that are suitable to the raga, Raga Sangati Swarakramamu, Maivadidaga Panchamam Botti, Gaula Dhaivata Manti. So she plays the Panchama and the Gaula Dhaivata, and then also plays the Gandhara. But then in downward movements, there were special phrases with ma. So avarohamuna madhyamam botti mohana leela. Did she only play songs in these ragas? Mavidarbha tanuja alarivendiyunu Srivardhanambu Srivilasambunu. It says Panchatalaswaramu, but I think the passage should be Panchataleshwaramu. Panchataleshwara pramukhambu laguchu minchu prabandhamul meeti kulambu చెలువంద వాయించి చెంతనున్నట్టి వెలది నొక్కతే పిలిచి వీణియల్ ఇచ్చి. So our Damayanti, the princess of Vidarbha, then performed prabandhas. She performed the Srivardhana, Srivilasa and Panchataleshwara to her heart's content. She beckoned an assistant, an aide, handed the veena over to her, and so after that she takes a fan and fans herself because she's in Tanjavur, not in Vidarbha. So what do we see in these passages? There are these this is a kavya text after all, and there are these really detailed descriptions of her preparing the instrument, her playing upon the scales, details, raga details of Nata and Gaula, and description of how Ayittams, Thayitanas, Sancharitanas were performed, compositions, a list of prabandhas, and so on. Okay, how much time do I have? One more sample? Okay, great. We have seen that. Okay, we began with a Natika, let's end with a Natika. We began with a Natika from Malwa. This one is from Tanjavur. This is the Raghunathavilasa. It's called Natakam, but it's actually a Natika, Raghunathavilasa Nataka of Yagnanarayana Dikshita. Now, who is this Yagnanarayana Dikshita? He is the son of Govinda Dikshita. He's the brother of Venkatamakhin, and he's written 3 literary texts, and one of them is this Raghunathavilasa. Like I said, the Natika often has a scene describing where the king or the hero describes a musical passage. I'm going to skip the verse, but what is happening here is the king has come with a Vidushaka to a grove outside the city, and there's a temple in the grove. There's somebody playing music in the grove, so there's a very nice, dense verse with gamaka, kaku, tala, nada, murchana, swara, and so on in it. And the king says how beautiful the song is. So that's kind of his snapshot review of the music. But then he asks, Kim ayam auduvo va, shadavo va, sampurno va ragaha. And then he listens a bit more. Punarapi savishesham akaranya, asau sampurna iti me nirnayaha. Saptavapi yat tavat avartante madhuram te swaraha. So the king listens and says, is this an Auduva raga? Is this a Shadava raga? Is it a Sampurna raga? He listens a bit and then says, I gather this is a Sampurna raga. It's a complete scale. And all the 7 notes, they go about so melodiously. Then he describes what the notes of this ragas are like. Arudha Shatshruti tau ubhau rishabhadaivatau. Nishadah kakali sanyo gandharash chantarabhidah. Shishtastrayopi avikrita eva shruyante. Tadayam nataragah eva. So the Rishabha and the Daivata, they both have the raised Shatshruti. They are raised to the Shatshruti interval. Arudha Shatshruti. The Nishada is of the kind called the Kakali. The Gandhara is the kind called the Antara. The rest of the notes, that is Sa, Ga and Pa, are all avikrita in their natural state. The surely is the Nataraga. So this is Raghunatha playing. I forgot to mention this. Raghunatha is the hero of this play, just like Arjuna Deva was the hero of that play. This is Raghunatha listening to a song where presumably he's listening to it being played on the veena, and he's being Sherlock Holmes and identifying what raga is being played. So this is the end of my selections. And just by way of some concluding remarks, this is the beginning of my work. I've been trying to survey Kavya Nataka literature from early modern South India to see all kinds of cultural data, but also data about the performing arts. I think we find more and more detailed descriptions in the early modern period. Why? Perhaps because in these courts we find the co-presence of Vagyakaras, of people writing Sangeeta Shastra along with poets. And we even have instances of scholars who normally would write a Shastra text being ready to write songs. So Ghanashyama Pandita, the most arrogant poet from Tulaja's court who wrote commentaries on kavyas, he found mistakes not just with previous commentators but even with the playwrights themselves. He has written a few padas in Marathi. The scholar Sadashiva Brahmendra, who wrote Vedantic texts, also wrote a few kirtanas. So this is a period when I believe the genre of song was getting a makeover. It's also a period of revitalization. So forms like the Geetam and the Aitam and the Prabandha, which one may think were already obsolete in the 15th and 16th century, we find from the manuscripts in the Saraswati Mahal that they were being composed in this period. And from the descriptions we saw in the kavyas we saw now, they were also being performed as far as we know. I think it's also a period when there was an emphasis on innovation. We frequently saw how somebody played Vinta Gatini in a novel fashion, and how Damayanti played a Vinta Ragamu. So innovation, I think, in this time wasn't seen as a bad thing. It was perhaps seen even as a desirable theme. So there's much work to be done on the Tamil, Telugu, Persian texts of the Deccan and South India. There's work to be done on the dance forms. There's work to be done on the names of instruments that occur here. And what we would need ideally is to set up a kind of historic atlas of the various stages of music, dance, and theater as we grasp from the non-musical, non-dramaturgical texts of this time, and with special emphasis on the Deshya vocabulary of music and dance. I think because in the Sanskrit vocabulary, we understand, or we delude ourselves into thinking we understand what these terms mean. And often that is complex. The term varies from period to period, from text to text, but we know so little about the Deshya terms that are used in descriptions of music, dance, and theater. With that, I finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Naresh Keerthi. Members of the Experts Committee, Sangeeta Kala Acharya Dr. Rita Rajan.
Wonderful presentation, Dr. Naresh Keerthi. First, in the Sanatkumara Charite, you recited certain verses in the Raga Kambodhi, that pertain to Natya. That was in the Tarasai. No? Can you just a little of that?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I can.
Chumma, koncham.
Chumma da. Everything I sing is chumma.
நானும் ரொம்ப சும்மா தான் கேட்குறேன்.
ಸರಸ ಗೀತದ ಶ್ರುತಿಗೆ ನಟಿಪಳ ಚರಣ ಕಮಲ ನ್ಯಾಸದಂಗನೆ ಕರದೊಳೋತ್ತುವ ತಾಳಲಯಕನು ಸಾರಿಯಹುದೆನಿ ಸಿ.
It resembles our sabdam. Sare kuneranam mitira samayammo nannelu kola swami tanja brihadiswaram rohkela jagu se இப்படி கூட காமிப்பா.
நரேஷ் நீங்க போட்ட மெட்டு தானே அது, அவர் போட்ட டியூன் தான் அது.
This is not. I don't think that I need traditional tunes for singing Kannada kavyas.
சரசிஜாக்ஷுலுத கமாடு அதேதான்.
தா 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 தை தக தா
That's
தா
right.
தலங்கதோம் கிடதோம் வரும்.
இதெல்லாம் வேற உண்டு அதுல.
அது தஞ்சாவூர்ல
Sure,
வந்திருக்குது.
sure. This is not a traditional tune. Yes.
ட்ரெடிஷ்னலாக வந்திருக்கு அதெல்லாம்.
Right.
And then அது நீங்களே சொல்லிட்டீங்க, ஹிந்தோளத்தில் அந்த இது கம்பித்தம் வருது, தட் வாஸ் அம்யூசிங். தென்
Chokkanathacaritramu.
சரித்திரமு, நேமிங் ஆஃப் த சிஷ்யாஸ், அதுக்கு அந்த பாலையா அந்த இது கூட போட்டு காமிச்சிங்க அந்த ஃபிலிம் இது. நீங்கள் அப்புறம் ஹி ஆல்சோ செட் வந்து இந்த இது பச்சை மிளகா அந்த மாதிரிலாம் அவளுடைய இன்டி பேர் இருக்கும்னு. அது அந்த மாதிரி பாலையாவுன்னு அவளுடைய சிஷ்யாவுக்கு வச்சிருக்கிற பேர் சுருட்டி பைரவி அந்த மாதிரி வாடான்னு எல்லாம் ஓடி வரும். ஆஃப்டர் ஹி வாஸ் பீயிங் டிஃபீட்டட், ஐ வாஸ் ரிமைண்டட் ஆஃப் தட்.
Actually, in the Inti Peru,
ஆமாம்,
Andhra University's first vice chancellor was Meka Apparao.
Okay.
Second was Aula Sambasiva Rao. Meka means goat, Aula means cow. So it was said that it was a natural progression going higher in the order.
I'll leave the recipe to you, Sri Ram, about what you want to cook with Meka and Avula.
Then in the Nalacaritamu of Raghunatha Nayak, you described how Damayanti played. Don't you think அதில் வந்து காவியம் இது வந்து நிறைய மியூசிக்கலாஜிக்கல் டீட்டெயில்ஸ் இருக்குது, ட்ரியடைஸ் மாதிரி போயிட்டு இருக்கு.
ஆமாம், that's quite right.
அது வந்து அந்த காவியத்தினுடைய இது பண்ணுறது இல்லையா, ஓவராக கொஞ்சம் மியூசிக்கலாஜிக்கலாக வந்து நாட்டையில் வந்து அவரோகணத்தில் வரைச்ச வந்து இந்த ஸ்வரங்களில் வரைச்சோம், இந்த மாதிரிலாம் வரைச்சா டோன்ட் யூ ஃபீல் இட் இஸ் கோயிங் மோர் இன் டு மியூசிக்கலாஜிக்கல் டீட்டெயில்ஸ்? காவியத்தினுடைய அந்த இது இஃபெக்ட், is it being lost? I am just asking.
I think it's a very important question. It's a question we have to use to reflect upon also other kavyas. The Alankarika Rajashekhara, he says Sarvaparshadam Kavyam. He says Kavya includes in its Parishat everything. So the quality of Kavya as a genre is meant to be encyclopedic. And we see this kind of happening in a progression from the older poets. So the poet Magha in Shishupalavatha, he has a couple of verses where he demonstrates detailed knowledge of Jyotisha Shastra, a couple of verses where he shows detailed knowledge of Ayurveda. And then through Shlesha, that is punning or some such technique, he connects it to the story of Krishna or Shishupala. The poet Sri Harsha, who wrote the Naishadha Charita, another complex Mahakavya based on the Nala theme, he was a great scholar. There is even a story about how he ate udad dal, udatham parappu, because he had practiced the Chintamani mantra and he had become so clever that nobody could understand what he was saying. So his teacher told him, you please eat some dal, that will make you a bit less smart, and then people will understand. There's a famous joke in Sanskrit, Ashesha Shemushi Moshe Mashan Ashnami Matula. So his mama asked him, what are you doing? He says, I'm eating dal to become dumb. And that he says in such a scholarly way, which means he has to eat a lot more dal to come down to the level of ordinary people. But why do we have this joke? Because the Naishadha is full of, there is a verse from the Naishadha which describes Damayanti playing on the veena. And there he uses how her playing the veena was like a female elephant going towards an elephant. And so the playing was Nishada Madhuram. Why? Because the swara of the elephant is Nishada. And it is full of such complicated descriptions. There are passages which use terminology from Mimamsa. There's passages which use terminology from Tantra. So I think it was one of the practices of Kavya, not throughout a Kavya, because then reading Kavya you'll get a migraine. But to have some passages from time to time, to also show that this is a scholarly genre, to make settings. I'm sure you have done this, madam. You just a moment. Yes. You must have sung sometime in an alapana or swarakalpana. I think even I have heard it sometime. A rare passage, which is a conversation between you and the super sahridaya. That person, that set of 4 or 5 people will say, aha, I've heard this when Dhanamal played something, or I've heard this in that particular record of Ramnath Krishnan. So I think the idea of Kavya is to be this mixed genre, where there are some things for everyone and some things to appeal for a particular Sahridaya. But I think your point is exactly right, that in this period, starting from certainly the 16th century, we see more and more detailed, sometimes to the point of being tedious, descriptions of music and dance performances in Kavya.
Because of the influence of Govinda Dikshidhar Venkatamaki.
Yes, but even before, I think Bhandaru, Lakshmi Narayana, and so on. And the question to ask, like we ask with cinema, is sure, nobody sets out to write a boring Kavya. So if Raghunatha Nayaka wrote this in his Nalacaritam, he must have been confident that his contemporary audience will find this interesting, that they are knowledgeable. They don't find, all these words, ayitam, sthayitana, sancharitana, doesn't feel things like something out of a textbook. So in a way, it's a compliment to his learned audience with whom he shared this intersubjective rasikatva. That's my guess.
He wanted to just, the king also wanted to, that he was quite well-versed in the musicological area.
That's right.
Also.
Absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
to project himself.
It's the same with Yajna Narayana's Kavya, isn't it? Why would the king, he could have just said, this is Nata. But why did he kind of give this breakdown, this analysis of the Rishabhadhaivatas being Shatshruti, the other being Kakali and so on? That is clearly to demonstrate that, look, I know these things. I know that it's valuable to know these things. It's valued to know these things.
If you don't mind, can I just say one thing? This is not very different from having 3 members of an audience. One person knows less. The other person seems to know more. And if you overhear their conversation, இது என்ன ராகம்? இது சம்பூர் ஒருத்தர் சொல்லிட்டு இருப்பார், இன்னொருத்தருக்கு ஒன்றும் தெரியாது. இல்லை அது காக்கல் நிஷாதம் வரல அப்படின்னு ஒருத்தர் சொல்லுவான். So one guy will be deciphering the entire in a descriptive manner. He'll decipher the ragam. While the person who doesn't know is saying, oh my God, he knows so much, but he's also learning. So in a way, it's not different from human behavior in some manner, right? We see that in the audience happening today. The so-called knowledgeable, less knowledgeable, and there's an interaction between the two, where both coexist in some manner.
Also in the Prabandha Kavyas of Krishnadeva and that era, for instance, the Amukta Malyada itself, if you take, the story is only in the last section. The beginning is all Nagara Varnana, Ritu Varnana, and that goes on for a long period of time.
Actually, it's divided into 3 sections.
Exactly.
And in each of these stories, in each of these khandas, let's call them, it's like there's a lot of bubble wrap, which are the varnanas, but the bubble wrap is beautiful. It's not like bubble wrap. So you have, there's a description of a woman playing on a Goti Vadya. She played the Megharanji on the Goti Vadya. There's a description of the Kaishika Purana story where somebody sang Mangala Kaishika. So, but I feel, so I've also looked a little bit at this, and I think the descriptions we find from the 15th century, they show knowledge. So there'll be 1 or 2 terms. But as we move closer to the 16th and the 17th, they are much more detailed. This is not someone who just, did ChatGPT, give me a few words connected to music and dance and wrote their kavya. These I feel, for example, look at the use of the term ayitam. The Sangeeta Shastra will say ayitam is a term for part of the alapana, for the akshiptika. But when you look at the Tanjavur manuscripts, ayitam is used as shorthand for notated alapas. And that's how they've used it. When they say, then they performed an ayita, the ayita punkinchi, which is a beautiful verb, which means to unfold, we find that there is a correspondence between, and it could also be that the scribes who wrote the labels on the song manuscripts in Tanjavur were scribes who read Telugu kavyas. So their notion of ayita didn't come from Shastra, but came from reading these kavyas that we saw today.
Madam,
Sangeeta Kala Acharya, Dr. R.S. Jayalakshmi.
இல்லை இந்த செகண்ட் செஞ்சுரி சிலப்பதிகாரம் கூட அது ஒரு எப்பிக்காக இருந்தாலும் அதில் வந்து அரங்கேற்று கதை ஆட்சியர் குறவை ஃபுல்லாக மியூசிக் தான் இருக்கும்.
ஆமாம்.
ஸோ இட்ஸ் இன் செகண்ட் செஞ்சுரி இட்ஸ் செல்ஃப்.
I totally confess my lack of competence in reading literary Tamil, especially of the Silappadigaram type. But I think that's a big domain of work to be done also from this early modern period. I'm sure there are Tamil kavyas of various genres also in the Sthala Puranas, because there are so many Sthala Mahatmyas being written in this period. And this is a time when you had songs, I think, exclusive repertoires of songs being composed for each kshetra so that they could be performed with the names of those deities. You know, Shahaji has composed songs like that. So there is a whole mountain of material which hasn't been looked at. And yes, I invite all of you to also continue this. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you. Vidwan R.K. Sriram Kumar.
It was a very, very wonderful lecture, Dr. Naresh, and thank you very much for that. I don't have much to add to this. As you rightly said, the references to all these musicological terms and about music in all these kavyas, it reminds me of even the Saundarya Lahari, where
Yes, Vipanchya Gayantya.
Vipanchya Gayanti matram illa, Gale Rekhas Tisro, Gati
yes.
Gamaka Geetaik, and where he talks of all the three gramas.
Yes.
And yeah, so as you rightly mentioned, it's not probably the mention of the gramas adds to the it's a description of the glory of the goddess, but it adds to that theme, I guess. In that shlokam, Galere
Yes, totally, and
Gati Gamaka Geetaika Nipune.
Yes, and I think
and
it draws upon so many old metaphors. So
Yeah.
I think there is a metaphor that there is a body of Shastra. There is a body of Kavya. Even Abhinav Gupta, he speaks about the Kavya Sharira.
Yeah.
Similarly, there is the Shastra Sharira.
And
What is the Shastra Sharira of Sangeeta? The Shastra Sharira of Sangeeta must be Matangi. Why? So what does Matangi do? She does Sammohana. She controls Sammohana. What does music do? The function of music is Sammohana. So I think while being very respectful, we can unravel some of these metaphors that are found in the poems. It's not just some kind of metaphysical smoke and mirrors. I think they are very clear what they are talking about.
Even in that shlokam, Angikam Bhavanam Yasya Vachikam
Right.
Sarvavangmayam,
Exactly. This kind of
Aharyam
cosmological
Chandrakara.
model of theatre.
Tam
That's exactly
Satvika
right.
Mission. Yeah.
Satvika Mission. Yes.
And the another interesting thing was when you, in the description of Hinduism, like probably in those times, Hinduism did not carry Daivatam is very interesting feature, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
that is
Hindola as a grama raga, Hindola as a grama. I think it's often spoken of as a grama, and there's a Deshi Hindola. There is a Hindola which is a grama of Vasanta. Now, I'm already out of my depth here, but I think this is entirely different from the Raga Hindola we know from the Mela period.
But still, that even with the Raga Hindola, the Rishabha Nishada
Rishabha
Rishabha
Dhaivata. Yeah.
Panchama Varjita, it says, right?
It said Rishabha Dhaivata. Varja.
In this, it says the Daivata Varjita.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for this thought-provoking, very beautiful lecture. Thank you.
Thank you for your observations.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the audience? Yes, I see a couple of hands going up there. Who's speaking? Oh, Sangeeta. Hi. Sorry, I didn't notice. Sorry. Mic just coming to you. Just one second, please. Just a second. Vidushi Sangeeta Shivakumar.
No, I just wanted to add to what Sriram said, that even the Jayanta Sena that you refer to, I don't think it's Jayanti Seni in Chudrel.
Jayanti Seni.
Because you said it's the Daivatam was like the
Gaula Daivatam.
but
That's
what we
right.
sing is not the...
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So perhaps next year you should call Raghunathanayaka, because he wrote this kavya. He's supposed to have created, because I think also in the Chaturdandi Prakashika, it says that he created Jayanta Sena. It doesn't give credit of Sangeeta Sudha to him, but credit of Jayanta Sena it gives to him. So if the kavya is by him, and there if he says it has Gauda Daivata, you cannot decide. I'm not someone who sings
I
Jayanta
think we
Sena
also
on a
just
regular
need to
basis.
look at Jayanta Sena's journey itself through multiple texts of that
I don't
period.
think there's so many data points.
I don't think
for
there's.
Jayanta
I was just going to say, but unfortunately for that ragam, if I remember right, seeing some long time ago, there's not much musicological textual reference we have, but we have to look at that.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we can even go there. No, I don't think we should go there at all.
Jaya, I think that's the person there, right? Jaya Akkana Pragada. Question to you. Come on.
Thank you. Namaste. I had a question about Sanatkumara Charite. There was a line which mentioned Khechari. I was just wondering how
So
was...
Khechara here means someone who travels in the sky. It's not referring to Khechari Vidya or any of that. So Khechara Nitambini, Khechara, some other word which means woman, would just mean an apsaras in this context.
Thank you.
The gentleman behind, sorry, can you introduce yourself when you ask your question?
Good morning. My name is Nakul, and good morning, sir. My question is, I've noticed a lot of swara-based or scale-based references to the ragas like Nata and Hindolam and all that. So my question is, when did phrase-based identity or tune, as Varnamit, as Rita ma'am said, how did we start identifying ragams through phrases or tunes, or have these two methods existed parallelly during the 13th century onwards? Phrase versus scale.
It's a great question. I don't think I have the competence to answer that. There are others here who perhaps could comment upon it. We find the name Gramaraga being used in kavyas already from the 9th century onwards. So they are familiar with the notion of something different from the jati, which is the Gramaraga. But how people identified musical practice, I think this is the difficulty of those who do history of forms like music and dance. Because music, performance, and dance are these ephemeral forms. You stop singing and then it's gone. Unlike, say, a palace, unlike, say, a canal, there are no remnants left over for us to reconstruct a history. So what we have to do is, and which has been done very well, is to look at the musicological text to see continuities and discontinuities from practice. But what we also have to do, which hasn't been done so much, is to look at descriptions in non-musical sources. So like the sources we...
Can I just try chipping in on that one?
Yes, please do.
Okay, maybe I'll do it in the end.
You can start. I'll just say it. And then, yeah. So anyway, we've come to his summing up. So I'd request Sangeeta Kalani, the designate Vidwan T.M. Krishna, to go ahead with his comments and also...
Yeah, I'd like first just respond to your question. One thing is very clear that even in Sangeeta Sudha, the ragas are described in phrases. So Alapataya Prabandha is more in terms of small notations given to you. So they are not independent things. Okay? And here what you see is identification of swaras. Does not mean the raga was based on those swaras. I think we don't know. Let's put it that way. We have to be a little careful to think that it was, in a contemporary sense, a scalular recognition.
Yeah.
Because the theoretical texts seem to indicate that when you describe the raga, ragas were described. That is the most beautiful part, even in musicology. So they described the raga in a literary sense and a notational sense. So therefore, I think it is safe to say that swaras were part of the conversation, but they were not it. Maybe that's a safer position at this point for me to place to you. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Naresh Keerthi for such an important lecture. I think it's a very important lecture because I think the world of music, Carnatic music, or even Khayal or Hindustani music and musicology is a silo, okay? And where we are not looking at other sources of where we can learn from. Though we always struggle with the idea of what was practice like. And I think it is in the kavyas where we understand practice. We don't understand much in the theoretical text. So I think this conversation between the kavyas, between the non-musicological texts, where for example, where somebody identified a raga or somebody described how it was placed, gives us a lot of very interesting insight into a probability of sound. That's the best we can do. There's also the other thing I found very curious is one of the tendencies in musicology is to always use old terminologies. It's interesting that you find that even in kavyas. Like talking about grammar ragas or grammar raga description in, say, 13th, 14th century seems quite interesting because by then we seem to have moved Deshi and even beyond what you could call Ratnakara Deshi, if you're going to call that. So that's also fascinating how even in Kavya's older terminologies were repeated.
Sure.
So the question I have for you, what were they used more in terms of oldness, or was there a different meaning at that point? Do we have any insight into that?
Yeah. I'm very cowardly to make global claims, but I'll try and do one now. So from my survey, what I've seen is that music dance descriptions from 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th century kavyas, and the bulk of these are kavyas, natakas, the bulk of these are mostly found from above the Deccan, from North India till Madhya Pradesh. They seem to derive their musicological and dance-related terminology from a limited pool. So they derive it mostly from Bharata. So a description of dance of that time very rarely will describe some kind of Deshi dance of that place. A description of a dance by Ratnakara writing the Haravijaya in Kashmir and Sriharsha writing in Gujarat will kind of be the same. And what will the dancer do? Chari, Karana, Angahara, same things. What drum will they play? They all play the Pushkara. Nobody plays a duff or a duffali or something. You can Sanskritize these terms. This is very rare. But after the turn of the millennium, and starting from the 13th century, after which we also find kind of more kavyas from South India and the Deccan, something changes. And also after the 14th century, it also changes above South India. So the old Rajasthani kavyas, the Braj kavyas, the Apabhransha kavyas, they don't fully jettison this terminology. So there is still a phase lag, and sometimes they use old terminology, but they are speaking about recent things. In lists of instruments, we hear about the rabab, the kanun, not just in North Indian kavyas. So I think in the Nalacaritamu, we have a description of the rabab, kanun, swaramandalamu. So that's another entire talk about the appearance of the swaramandala in kavya literature. But we find that there is some kind of shift which happens gradually. It's not a single point after which the shift happens, but starting from the 14th century, I do think that this phase lag that you described, Krishna, about people using an older and this kind of tendency to archaize, to kind of depict a scene which is perhaps from earlier on, I think that goes. And that also has to do with the moment. I think, again, avoid broad global claims, but I think it was a moment of innovation, it was this moment of revitalization, and they actually knew these genres they were talking about. There were some version of it. Maybe the Gita Thayas that were being sung in the Vijayanagara court weren't the same as they were described, but they had some Gita Thaya. And these are the ones being described by Kanakadasa and Bommarasa.
I mean, in some way, if I can maybe ask you this question also, that isn't that the period when you also find the idea of Sangeeta also changing meaning of Sangeeta, becoming music in our understanding.
Right.
You find the treatises, musicological treatises also diverging. Till then, you find them talking about Sangeeta as a theatre dance, with prioritization, of course, different from, say, Bharata to, Matanga to Sangeeta Ratnakara. But post Sangeeta Ratnakara, you also find only music technical treatises coming up, where there is no larger aesthetic description. So it's interesting around that period you find this also happening, right?
Yeah, totally. I think that's another huge point about how it's almost as if as knowledge got broader and richer and more detailed, there was specialization.
Exactly.
So earlier, you'd find a text both with an Alankara section and a dramaturgy section. Yeah. Now this splits. You have exclusive Kavya Shastra text and exclusive dramaturgy text. And I think it's the same happening with music and theatre.
Exactly,
This kind of break is happening. I'm sure you're absolutely right.
It's a very interesting thing. Just in terms of many of the terms that I saw, for example, Suddha, Salaga, all these things are terms in tech, we think of how these Suladis, for example.
Yes.
So, all these questions were raised. And of course, I wish we can find that Samanta again. That's a romantic idea, but I'll still hold that. Finally, actually, your whole entire lecture reminded me that many years ago, Dr. Schulman sent me something. And I think I sang it only once, but I will just share this here because it's very relevant. This is a verse from Bhattumurti.
Yes, Ramaraja Bhushana.
Exactly, in which there is this description.
That's
in Vasucharitramu, there is this verse, and this also in a way, I think Sriram's question on Hindola, but this is about Vasanta.
Yes, Ariga Pansamameva.
Exactly,
Ariga
Ariga
This is quoted
Pansamameva.
by Subrahma Dikshita.
I was going to say
Lakshana.
that. I was just going to say.
I didn't mean to spoil it for you.
No, please go ahead. You're the scholar. Please, this is something Subrahma Dikshita quotes. That's why I want. Go ahead.
So he says that in the Vasanta, and of course, all of the musical verses in Bhattumurti are very allusive. So they are referring to musical elements in an indirect way. But what is funny or curious is that Subbarama Dikshita uses this verse that describes the Panchama that is sung in Vasanta, which means the Kokila sings the Panchama during the Vasanta, as proof that the Raga Vasanta, which you should sing in the 19th and 20th century, should have the Panchama note.
Exactly. And in Subbarama Dikshita, there's Chuta Panchama Madhyama.
Yeah.
In his notation, the Vasanta has a Chuta Panchama Madhyama. And I remember the description is that the cuckoos sing the pa.
That's right.
And the women do not sing it because the cuckoo sings the pa so beautifully.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that in fact, Subbarama Dikshita brings Kavya, in a sense, into his musicological explanation in some way. I just thought it will be nice to conclude with that.
It's a great point. And Subbarama Dikshita was trained, he was trained in Telugu Kavya and Tamil Kavya. He's even edited some Tamil Kuravanji. That's right. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Naresh Keerthi, for a fabulous morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krishna, and thank you, Naresh. Tomorrow we have just one program, and that is a panel discussion. Hindustani Ragas in the Carnatic repertoire, panel discussion. Participants Vidwan M.A. Sundareswaran, Dr. Pantula Rama, and Dr. Subhashini Parthasarathy. We meet at the usual time at 8 a.m. I look forward to seeing you all here. Have a great day ahead. Bye for now.